This episode brought to you by Peter Wood's Museum of the Impossible.
What's a Museum of the Impossible? It's gonna be like Harry Potter meets Ripley's Believe It or Not. It'll be a one-of-a-kind, themed, interactive space where people can experience the impossible. But I need your help. To get the project started, I've set up a Patreon over at museumoftheimpossible.com. If you're able to throw a few bucks my way each month, we can build it together. Thanks for your support, and I can't wait to welcome you into the Museum of the Impossible. Welcome to the podcast of The Impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my guest today was the first mind reader to appear on America's Got Talent. Since then, he's been featured on Ellen, Live with Kelly and Ryan, Penn and Teller Fool Us, and with The Illusionists on Broadway. It's a pleasure to chat today with Mr. Eric Dittelman.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I like that I want to talk about this right out of the gate because a big part of why we're chatting today, you are headed to my state, Maryland, to perform on Pulaski Highway. Matt Donnelly calls it the Highway of Dreams at Mick's Crab House. So what do you already know about Elkton? Like what have you heard from other people? I'm just curious.
Surprisingly few elk. That's all I've heard.
Fair. Okay. Yeah, I've never seen an elk there. That's true.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. I hear it's a fun town and there's a good crowd, so I'm excited to perform there. That's all I know. So I'm pumped.
Yeah. No, it's been I've done it a couple of times. And I don't know how much of it. I mean, I'm sort of the local boy, so it's a little bit I feel like I get a little bit less of the like arms crossed, like, all right, prove yourself, you know?
Right.
But it is, it's a really fun, it reminds me of what you want out of a comedy club crowd where there is an interaction there that folks are completely willing to speak their mind in the middle of the show. And that makes it fun for any level of sort of improv, not knowing what's going to be said or done, you know?
That's my ideal environment. I cut my teeth doing comedy clubs. So, you know, when I was first doing open mics and then just my first couple gigs was up in Boston and like the comedy studio and stuff like that. So, and I have a foot in the improv world. So I like that byplay. I like to kind of be on my toes and interact with the crowd. And as a mind reader, you never know what people are going to be thinking anyway. So you might as well be able to roll with the punches and make sure it's a fun show no matter what. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so tell me, I don't know much about your origin story, sort of pre-AGT. How do you sort of picture Dittelman coming into the world? I mean, as a mind reader.
Sure. Yeah, I was into magic as a young kid. My dad brought me back magic from his trips to Vegas, watched the whole world's greatest magic specials on TV. And of course, Blaine, you know, kind of changed everything with his magic specials as well. So I started just doing it as a hobby for a long time, a couple birthday parties here and there, but not really performing professionally. But it was in college I made the switch from magic into mind reading. I was just fascinated why it works on people. I was studying some of the top mentalists from their books, and I had to go meet them as well. So I made these connections. I flew out to Vegas, and then ever since then, I've made the switch and I was a school teacher for 2 years.
Oh, cool.
Not for me. I did not like it. I mean, I should have known because I'm not a morning person.
Oh yeah.
So. At the end of the school day, I would just kind of be more awake and then excited to go to these open mics and just try what I wanted to do. And finally pulled the trigger and pursued the performing career instead of the teaching career.
Did you find it? I'm always in awe of my teacher friends. When I'm booked to spend 45 minutes with a group, I don't, if we go off on some tangents and we skip a whole hunk, whatever, it's fine because I don't have like a syllabus or a test. That to me is the most nerve-wracking part, I would guess, about being a teacher is like, listen, people, we've got to do that. There's information I have to give you here today.
Well, I've always had the performance side. So I was actually a music teacher. I taught like chorus, middle school chorus. Was my last year, which was a little too much for me.
Okay.
but
Yeah.
but I remember when I decided I wasn't coming back, I was working on my blindfold routine, and I did it in front of my 6th and 7th grade chorus, which is a hard audience to perform for. So I think it was a lot of trial by fire,
Yeah.
and then it prepared me for audiences going forward. So.
Well, and you do a bunch of college work now, right? Is that still your sort of bread and butter, or what's your?
Yeah, college and corporates are my primary, and I'm trying to do more public shows because people are always like, "Where can I see you perform?" So this is why this summer's kind of been my magic theater tour of all these venues that have popped up that are some gorgeous places, and so Elkton's one of those stops. So I'm excited to do some public shows for people.
That's going to be fun. I'm sure there are folks who either are listeners or of your podcast or who have seen you on TV, and it'll be fun that you're coming to their town and they'll get a chance to see some stuff.
Right. Yeah.
when you think about, are you worried about stuff getting burned on TV, or do you like sort of, showing an audience something that they might have seen on AGT or Ellen or Fool Us?
Well, the fun thing with doing a mind reading show is, again, the thoughts are always different. So even if the framework is the same,
sure.
The drawings for my blindfold routine are always going to be different. Or, the different, I do a piece with a holiday themed reveals of a Halloween costume or a Christmas present. So those are all going to be different. So it's about the byplay with the person and their individual thoughts. So even though the structure of the show might be similar, the individual specifics are going to be different every time.
That's fair. And that way they can still have the excitement of like, oh, I saw him do this on TV, but it's also not like, oh, I know where this is going, because they don't know what the person is going to be thinking. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be a different experience. And it's, again, using a lot of improv. So every show's different because you got to be there in the audience for that specific show for that joke to make sense or that reveal to make sense.
Right.
Now, some things are a little bit more, predetermined or pre thought out, like when I did Deal or No Deal on America's Got Talent. That was specific to that show, so I'm not going to be doing that, necessarily in my live show, because that was very much customized to Howie Mandel. And also I would love to travel with 16 beautiful models holding briefcases, but just feasibly, I haven't figured out a way to make that work.
And you can't source them locally, I assume. Like if it's in your rider. I need 16.
That would look very strange in your rider. Provide me 16 women to hold cases, please.
Yeah. I don't think that's weirder than no blue M&Ms for sure. That's not good. Well, do you find are there things you've done on TV that you extend, like there was the shorter TV version because you only had a 4-minute chunk, and you sort of play with it more in person?
Yeah, I mean, even just the blindfold routine, which was my big audition for AGT, I was on the show back when it was really strict 90 seconds. So I knew I could do that routine on TV because I was like, where do they technically start the timer? Is it after I've already blindfolded myself? But I was shaving down words every time I was on TV and hoping my scripts made sense still. We were presetting things at first, and right before I walked on stage for that first round, the producers came to me and they go, oh, we think presetting things is going to look a little too set up. So they said, don't worry about time. So then I was able to play and add all the jokes that I had cut back in and had a good time, because I also remembered that first round, those are pre-taped and they can edit it down to whatever they want, Right. So it's like, oh, I'm just going to do my thing. But but when I do that live, it's a lot more give and take. So I stretch it out. It's a lot more freedom for me to have fun on stage rather than, I'm always worried when I'm playing against a clock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially those early open mics I was doing. I remember trying the blindfold routine, and they light you, right? You only have 3 minutes, 5 minutes at some of these open mics. And I remember when I was first trying it, they're lighting me, and I can't see the light because my eyes are duct taped shut.
Of course. Why?
So
that's so funny.
I remember one embarrassing moment where it was my first time ever doing it, and the host had to then tap me on the shoulder and be like, "You're way over time."
they've never had a blindfolded comic on stage before, so that was not.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't think about that. No, yeah,
Sure.
I felt. I mean, it's funny. Like the of the two things that I've done on Fool Us, when I do them now, it sort of is a hybrid of I like some of the lines and some of the brevity, but then there was other children that were killed that I put back in. Where it's like,
exactly.
that was still fun. I'm gonna do that line or that bit of business or whatever.
Right.
But and then do you think about like how much are you looking to change up your show? Like are you trying, if somebody books you 2 years in a row, are you trying to make sure that it's all different material, or is it again back to, well, because people's thoughts are different, I can do a lot of the same sort of routines or structures?
Right. Well, I always have my go-to pieces that I think are like kind of my signatures that I know people are going to see. And again, because things change up, they still feel fresh, even if you've seen that structure before. But I'm always constantly working on new stuff as well. So even in this little Magic Theater tour I'm doing, part of the reason I'm doing it is to just work on new material and break it in. And so I have some new pieces that I've been having fun with, and we're going to see how those go at different areas around the country, because some of them, it depends on the location and the clientele of the audience, whether they're going to play. Awesome. I used to have a show in New York called Amaze Balls, which was a kind of a booked open mic, but just a place to try new stuff. And we just kind of, our tagline was like, "Hey, this is not our A material. Stuff might not work all the time. You might learn a secret or two. Just don't be a jerk about it." That was the whole idea. So we would try some pretty edgy stuff, and being in a politically liberal bastion, you could get away with some racier stuff that maybe you can't get away with in different parts of the country too. So it's finding that balance when you're on the road. For sure.
Right. Yeah, definitely. If you're trying, if it's not just like methods, but like, how does this joke land? I'm sure will be different and in different. Mm-hmm. Do you find that happening in colleges, or do you feel like the colleges in general, because they're usually more of a historical liberal scene? How do you feel that?
It's interesting. You kind of have to play it a little safe now, because college used to be the place where you could try all this freedom of expression, but I think there is a little bit of cancel culture, being worried not to offend, make sure everything's inclusive. It's so funny because Jerry Seinfeld had that article that came out where he's like, "I can't do colleges these days." I was like, "You're not doing colleges these days, Jerry. You're doing huge theaters." But the idea is that people can tend to get offended on behalf of other people rather than be offended themselves. So you're always kind of playing that line. So it is nice to play it safe, but also, sometimes it is fun to be edgy within that context because they don't expect it. So it's just about threading the needle, and if you're likable and the intent is there, I think you're still good.
I think they can. I think an audience can sense your heart better than a lot of people realize. And a lot of it all, so much of it is context and being in the room with that person on that night. And if somebody tweets a thing that you say and it's completely out of context, that's sort of wasn't the intent whenever you were saying it, But I also
exactly.
I also appreciate that you and I, like, because we have this other thing that we do that's not just comedy, I don't feel like I have to quite like walk the line and push the envelope as much as maybe some of my pure stand-up comedian friends, Do you feel that, like, you're not taking as many comedic risks, maybe? Is that fair to say?
I'm trying, especially with this new piece that speaks directly to what we're talking about right now.
Okay. Cool.
There's a whole piece designed around this kind of idea of cancel culture, which I'm having a lot of fun with. Nice. And it's playing really well. Okay. But also the other interesting thing is I do a lot of self-deprecating humor, especially, being raised Jewish. I have a lot of Jewish jokes. So like when I've done colleges that are a very religious school, like I always have to just kind of gauge it sometimes, and in certain parts of the country being like, well, this counts as diversity here, so this is your diversity budget at work. But But I remember doing one school and there was literally a cross above the stage. And I was
Okay.
just like, am I going to do those jokes? And I went for it. And every
Okay.
time I did, I just looked up at the cross and it just got an extra punchline every time.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of just, again, knowing people's hearts and knowing you're not trying to, talk down or demean anyone. And it's just kind of like, this is all, we're all here to have a good time anyway. So.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I think, and there, you can sort of get almost like the ventriloquist, if you're going to say a line and then you sort of acknowledge that was not maybe appropriate for this venue, but you can kind of have your cake and eat it too by doing that.
Right. Exactly.
Larry the Cable Guy, I remember, I'm like the biggest fan of his, but I remember him doing a lot of that where he would say a line and then say, "Lord, I'm sorry for that." And it was like, wait, but if you were really sorry, you wouldn't have said it, but okay, whatever. Like he's very, very clever to be able to get that in there,
Yeah, it just reminds me of like some of those children's entertainers that throw in adult humor and say this is for the for the adults in the audience rather than the kids, or like Pixar throws in a bunch of jokes just for the families and the parents there that bring the kids to the shows as well. So it's kind of just playing around and knowing your audience and putting in peppering in those things that are kind of like working on another level at the same time.
Right. No, I think it's helpful too. I mean, it reminds, especially even before I was a parent, I would go to shows that were for kids and realize that this is just for kids. Like as a grown up, I wanted to stick a fork in my eye because it's like they forgot that there were going to be grown-ups in the room. It was just for young people. And so I think Pixar does that so masterfully. Was there ever a kid show era in your career?
No, I did a couple family shows like as part of a variety show, where I was one act. But I remember even coming out and being like, "This is for your parents now. Here's some mentalism." And I think even just because there was a lot of kids in the audience, I did use a couple kids in the show, and I remember even working on the blindfold routine and I go to reveal their drawing and I'm just like, "Oh, I'm getting a lot of scribbles," and the audience is like, "Yeah, well done." That's all the kid did. So
what else would it be?
That's why one of the reasons I don't use kids in the show.
That's funny. So. Yeah, no, I think I will, I'll have folks, I've spent some time behind magic shop counters as well as, when someone, I don't do a lot of birthday parties at this point, but, people would always say like, well, I have a 5-year-old, but they're very bright. And it always cracked me up because no one ever comes in and says, "I have a 5-year-old, but they're basically at a 2-year-old level." Let's be honest, But you have to learn, you have to know the rules of the world before you can break them. And that's, and especially I think with mentalism, because it's easier for a young person to see that rabbit used to be white and now it's black and now it's red. Okay, that's a color change. But the fact that mentalism is only happening inside your head, do you have to be a little bit more worried about people's attention? Like if they miss one part of it, if you don't have their undivided attention, they may completely miss what you're trying to do. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, that's the difference is that there's nothing visual happening. So finding ways to make it visual is always an interesting problem to solve. You could do that obviously verbally if you're painting a picture and engaging people, but I try to have at least different stage pictures. So I'm using like 4 chairs on stage, getting people moving around a lot. The blindfold obviously has a picture quality to it, which is one of the reasons why I did it in the first round of America's Got Talent. But I've performed at all sorts of venues, so you never know what distractions are going to be there. You try to eliminate them. Yeah. But sometimes I remember one college I did, my performance was literally right next to their bowling alley while people were bowling.
Wow. Wow.
You kind of had to work around the strikes and pins falling and still focus everyone in. But again, I think part of using humor and my personality, is in the engaging part where, a lot of mentalism traditionally has that stereotype of being a little dry and drawn out and boring in some ways. So
it would be hard. I'm not saying Max Maven couldn't have handled that, but that persona would have been harder to take seriously while you hear pins being knocked down,
Well, Max is
funny.
interesting too because he got his start in comedy clubs. I mean, he did
sure.
so many.
Yeah.
He created that market for mentalists in a comedy club, especially during the comedy club boom, and then being so strikingly visual with his persona, people were apt to pay attention to him because, like, who is this guy and what does he do?
Right.
So,
Yep. No, absolutely. So who were, when you were sort of getting into mentalism, who were the people who you were looking to either in print or in person to sort of get ideas from?
Yeah, my two biggest influences were Bob Cassidy. I got very close with Bob Cassidy, especially towards the end of his life. But I remember even just going to a workshop, and I was like the youngest by like 30 years and like trying to figure out some stuff and just totally failing in front of all of these people that I respected. And then Bob took me aside and, we had some, basically took me to the bar. It talked me off the ledge. I got to see what Bob really enjoys.
Yep.
At the bar. And then just he was always a big supporter of mine. And then a couple years later, America's Got Talent, my big break happened. And he couldn't have been prouder. So we had a great relationship. And, one of the reasons I joined the Psychic Entertainers Association was to be at his memorial. So, and I got to perform one of his pieces for his family in a room of mentalists that knew exactly everything I was doing, knew how it all worked. But to be there and to honor him was a really special moment for me.
Yeah.
And then the other one is Banachek. I just loved the way he thinks. And my first mentalism book was Psychological Subtleties, which, a lot of people go more traditional, Kahneman, Corinda. I got to those eventually, but I loved just this improv nature of that book and the thing you could be wrong and things could go, awry, and it's all about performing. I kind of treated it like, a stand-up comic. You go up on stage with a microphone and have no props. And, that's what kind of drew me to mentalism in the first place. So having a foot in the comedy world is like, this is the best equivalent, I think, in the magic world. So combining those two was a key, element of my shows.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, I know a lot of like prop comics get a bad rap. Do you think, was that part of your leaning toward mentalism versus prop magic, or was that not the right time in your sort of career development?
Well, I know, that they do have a bad rap, prop comics, and even, I mean, the hierarchy is comedians were always looking down at magicians were always looking down at mime. Yeah. But like, if you look at it the other way, like sometimes the pay is the opposite, or especially what you need to carry sometimes is the opposite. But for me, it was more just I was used to being on stage without anything, so I was like, let's continue just see if this could be personality driven and hide behind the trap. It just meshed more with my personality, not to hide behind the props, so to speak. So
totally. Well, and especially with an improv background, I can, there is certainly something about picking up on people's thoughts, but a lot of times sort of you're writing a story on the fly because they are a co-author in that story. And so I'm sure it makes a lot more sense to be doing that again, as opposed to some more visual traditional magic. You're essentially yes-anding the audience the whole time you're on stage. So. Yeah. Well, I'm excited that you're going to be coming to Maryland, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to be there in person, but I do know, at least as of this recording, there are at least a handful of tickets sold, but it's not an infinitely sized room. And I do love that space where it's, there are giant theaters that you will play. And this room is definitely a much more intimate, I don't want to say front row experience, but everyone's going to have a great sort of time being in that space, almost like a living room kind of show. So that is coming up on Thursday, July 12th. And if people want to grab tickets for it, they are going to be over at elktonmagic.com until they're gone. And then you're going to have to catch Eric on one of the other East Coast tour dates. So for anyone who's listening to this, you haven't been seeing on the screen here, ericdittelman.com. That's EricDittelman.com is where you can go for all that information. And then also on the socials, Dittelman You can follow all of your adventures when you're going to see cool shows and adding stuff in and doing public events like this. But this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter. It was great chatting with you.
Absolutely. And thank you to our friend who's listening in on it. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Podcast of the Impossible. But for more of my public shows, social media, and more, you can head on over to peterwood.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thanks.